And if you are a frequent traveler by air, you probably have some concerns. But perhaps a little more specifically this morning is the comment attributed to the Minister of Aviation that the federal government will not allow any foreign airline operator to treat Nigerians with disdain. Well, of course, we tried to reach out to the minister to get his perspective personally, but we were unable to reach him. However, we have two people with us this morning in the studio to try to take a look at this issue for us. We have the Director, Consumer Protection of NCAA, Adamu Abdullahi. Thank you very much for joining us. As well as an aviation expert and former President of NAPE, David Ballamy. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. Yes. So let me begin with you. Let us begin with you, Mr. Abdullahi. So what exactly is this all about? We've been hearing some news in the air about the Turkish airline and all of that. So please take us through what exactly is the issue.
Okay, the issue is this. Nigerians travel heavy. We carry a lot of baggage whenever we travel. We have life experiences. All of us have traveled. We have seen the way our people behave whenever we have a boarding call is made. You see people rushing to enter that flight because of the simple fact that they have baggage they want to put in the cargo hold, in the baggage upstairs. So therefore, what normally happens is you see people trying to carry into the aircraft itself 3 pieces of baggage, 4 pieces, some would even back some would make tummy with others. And the most regulated industry in the world is aviation. We have weight restrictions. Each aircraft has a maximum takeoff weight, which has to be taken into consideration as you load the aircraft. So a family coming from US or Europe to Nigeria for Christmas, for instance, you see them with 12 pieces of baggage, 20 pieces of baggage, and they want to come along with those bags. They check them in. If there is need to pay excess baggage, they pay. But then airlines have taken into consideration the fact that the kind of aircraft they bring into the country conforms with the bilateral air services agreement that you have with them, even though most buses now allow airlines to come with whichever type of aircraft they want to. But then they have to look at the economics of it. If you take a wide-body aircraft and load passengers, you don't have a full load of passengers, you only have full load of luggage, as well as the fuel you carry. You are in conformity with the weight restrictions, but then the economics of it, by the time you fill the aircraft and take other issues into consideration, you don't make or even break even, not talk of profit. So therefore, they come in with smaller aircraft. You see what that's what Turkish does. That's what Egypt Air, Royal Air Maroc, most of the other African carriers, Kenya Airways, they all come in with a 737-800 series.
And does that conform with the bilateral agreement that was signed?
It does. It's the bilateral. The buses say any type of aircraft they want to come in, they can come in. So it's the economics that's in play now. You have 110, 120 passengers, maybe 70% of the load that the aircraft can carry, or of passengers that is, and then the rest is baggage. So therefore, there is a window that international regulations give. The MC99, that the Montreal Convention of 1999, to which Nigeria is a signatory, allows airlines a window of 21 days before they can bring in your baggage. So therefore, if they have these weight restrictions, they keep your baggage behind, bring you in. Make sure you stay maybe 2-3 days and maximum before you now get your bags. In that, within the next 3 days, when they use a 737 for 1, 2, 3 days, the 4th day it will be a wide-body aircraft, so that all the baggages that are backlog will now be brought. But the passengers don't want to wait for that window of 2-3 days before they can get their bag. They want it now.
Understandably, but from what you say now, it sounds as though what happened actually, their actions conformed, with the agreement. So I'm just wondering. So what was the issue, the main issue?
The main issue is this: there are other issues they have to contend with. You see, whenever there are issues that are prone to give problems in aviation, the regulations look into them and find solutions. They tend to ameliorate the suffering of the passenger, so that they say that the airlines also now have to give its passenger what we call first needs. You have to buy small-ish thing that you need, toothpaste, underwear, that you need to change your clothes, drugs that you may have checked in that you still need, and things like that, so that you wait before your baggage comes in. Most airlines don't do that. So it becomes a problem, and they start to fight in the airports. So what we really normally want to do is to avoid such conflicts in the airport.
Right.
So we encourage the airlines, come with bigger aircraft, make sure you bring the load on time, make sure you even announce to passengers before boarding that your baggage will not come along with you.
All right. Now, this has brought to the fore major issues. And, Mr. Balami, this is one, next to the passenger, another important thing is your baggage. Without your baggage, you're pretty much just alone. So now this is a major issue. The Minister of Aviation has come in, NCA has also come in to stop this. But there's a bigger concern. There are other issues also that happen that fly under the radar that, people don't really pay attention to. So are you worried that, aside from this, there are other issues also that need to be regulated properly?
Well, you see, like my director did say, aviation is highly, highly, highly regulated. And in everything, safety must come first. He just talked about there's a maximum takeoff weight. The aircraft for a long-haul flight, 4, 5, 6 hours flight, there's a amount of fuel you must carry. So at some point, you must make up your mind. If I'm approaching Lagos or Abuja and there's a bad weather, do I have enough fuel to take me to the next airport? So will I trade that for passengers' luggage or not? These are safety issues. These are standard recommended practices. One thing also is, as a nation, as Nigerians, we know we are serious consumers. I've traveled to other parts of the world, other continents. You will hardly see people carrying the kind of load because all we do is just to consume. So part of the problem also is we must look inward and begin to produce things in-house.
as you both would know, it's the right of the passenger to carry whatever it is that he wants to carry. And if he can afford to pay for it, it's his prerequisite, right? But we have an operator, so to speak, joining us via Skype is the Managing Director of Aero Contractors, Captain Ado Senusi. Thanks for joining us this time. We know it's really dark at this time where you are. So once again, thank you very much. But you are not unaware of what's in the news. The Minister of Aviation is saying that foreign airlines cannot be allowed to treat Nigerians with disdain any longer, making an example of Turkish Airline in particular, because that's been in the news. And of course, Turkish Airline is also making efforts to ensure that doesn't happen. As an operator, what's your perspective?
Yeah, as all the other contributors have said, aviation is highly regulated, and all these issues have been dealt with in many of the conventions, Chicago Convention and the rest. But I have a different view on this because as an operator, you know the kind of passengers, the kind of luggage you carry to any destination. So you must put the right equipment at the right time. I think Turkish problem was they don't have the local knowledge. They should know that during the end of year, that's Christmas and New Year, Nigerians travel and they travel very, very heavy. So they should put a bigger airplane to carry those loads. And if they don't, there is consequences for that, as enshrined in the conventions, ICAO conventions. And I think what the minister did was to actually make NCA to implement those conventions and to actually tell them that they must have local knowledge. They must understand, yes, a route can be thin in the year, but towards the end of the year, it will be definitely heavy. And that's what other carriers do in other parts of the world. They deploy a thin routes, they deploy an aircraft that will service that route. And when the route is going to be heavy, they deploy a bigger airplane. And it's done all over the world. I don't know why Turkish decided to do that, but I'm happy they have realized their mistake, and I believe they will not repeat it again.
You know, this brings to for a bigger conversation. You know, the role aviation plays, you know, in the economics of Nigeria, the economy especially. Now, reports have it that the aviation sector contributes about 0.4%. Now, the worldwide average is about 3.6%. In the US, it's 5%. So we have a major gap to fill. Now, there's a talk about capital flights. It is said that about 95% of international passengers actually use, you know, foreign airlines. And I hear a lot that we have so much capacity in Nigeria's aviation, or potential rather. We have so much potential in Nigeria's aviation sector. So the big question is, how do we begin to bridge this gap? I mean, $3 billion, that's how much is said to be leaving the country through capital flight. So how can we ensure that we bridge this gap and empower our aviation sector?
Well, as I said in several interviews, our contribution to the national GDP is quite low. And there's, of course, a lot of capital flight with international flights operating in Nigeria and taking the money out. What we need to do is to encourage the airlines that have the capacity now that can either enter into collaboration with international airlines so that they can keep at least part of the money they're carrying out, or those that can even go solo, that means go by themselves, to start this international flight. So we have to encourage them as a country. And it's not only the federal government that needs to encourage them, it is also the Nigerian people, because Nigerian people must patronize the airlines and must make sure that they recognize buying your own is helping your country. So if, let's say, an airpiece is going to Sharjah, so let's say the airpiece should be at least full every time before Emirates or Qatar or any of the Middle Eastern airlines going out. That shows patriotism. And if it decides to start flying anywhere else, the airline should be filled. We can look at China, we can look at North Korea, we can look at South Korea. I mean, we can look at all these countries that have developed their aviation industry. Their countrymen actually helped the airlines to do that. Yes, of course. There will be challenges in the beginning. There will be services will not be good and everything, but that is the only way we can develop it, by criticizing it and constructively criticizing the airlines, encouraging them to be better. Because all the airlines that we are now patronizing, the British Airways, the Emirates, and the rest, they didn't start from the top. They started from somewhere. So we must encourage our own. And then the government will come in to bring in like Fly Nigeria Act and the rest to encourage the local carriers to make sure that we arrest this capital flight.
Speaking of Nigerians taking Nigerian flights, you see that the total passenger traffic for last year showed that about 18 million Nigerians actually used air travel, basically. That's about 10%. And if you ask me, we know that is really low. And that brings to bear the cost of air travel in the country. Is there a way we can actually bring it down such that we can have more people use that means of transportation, and eventually brings in more funds, increased investment, and eventually we can begin to grow to international travel? What do you think about that?
Yeah, of course. The only way we can, and as I've said it several times, the only way you can bring the cost down of even the domestic travel is to increase capacity. For the past 3 to 4 years now, the passenger traffic has been increasing while the number of aircrafts in the country has been decreasing, and the demands have been increasing. So we must increase the capacity. We must deploy more capacity, and we must service the entire airport system in the country. Infrastructure must be improved, and also of course the carriers, that means the airlines, of course, are having challenges in obtaining aircrafts from outside the country, and the government can come in to ensure that they have cheap funds to get either leases or to get even outright purchase of aircrafts. But the main problem is, as the passenger traffic is increasing, the number of aircrafts are decreasing, and that's what's going to happen during this travel season. At the end of the year, there are challenges of Hamatan, there are challenges of sometimes lack of Jet A1, and the increase in traffic. And then coupled with the fact that there are fewer aircraft flying in Nigerian airspace now. So the tickets fare, especially during this Christmas and New Year season, will definitely increase. The airlines will open the higher buckets and to make sure they gain as much as they can. So most of the flights are fully booked now because most of the airlines have deployed the capacity. In fact, some have gone out to bring more airplanes to see whether they can manage the capacity. As I've said, Nigeria is the last frontier in aviation investment because we are still at ground zero as far as aviation investment is concerned. We don't have a very formidable carrier that can fly in most of the European countries, the Americas, Middle East, and also service the local market.
Well, Captain Adosanusi, we want to thank you very much for your time. We recognize the time of day at which you are right now speaking to us about 2 a.m. You need to catch some sleep. Thank you so much for speaking with us. Captain Adosanusi is Managing Director, Aero Contractors. Thank you so much for your time. Well, Malkwe has questions for our guests in the studio here in Lagos. Malkwe, over to you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask our guests. I mean, they've talked about, the fact that airlines can bring any type of aircraft into the country with the kind of buses that we sign these days, which doesn't specify in detail what sort of aircraft they should bring, or that they're already complying anyway with the kind of aircraft that they should bring if we are specifying they are. However, I mean, are passengers aware of the fact that, because when you bought your ticket as a passenger, you've read the rules set by airlines, because some airlines have very detailed rules with regards to baggage, and you found out that you haven't violated any of the rules, or that you're not in breach of any of the rules as set by the airlines. Shouldn't the airlines be upfront about the sort of aircraft they're bringing for a particular journey, and passengers should know what to expect for that particular trip if they're different from the general guidelines that they have set out in their baggage rules?
Okay, Mope, let's look at it this way. As I said earlier, the buses are silent on top of aircraft that airlines can bring. It makes it absolutely the choice of the airline what kind of aircraft it wants to operate. And as Captain Adosanusi rightly pointed out, it is the onus. The onus lies on the airlines to bring in, to do a research first and foremost, find out what it is that their passengers need and apply the kind of aircraft that would satisfy those needs. It is a very difficult decision to take in that, as I told you earlier, economics comes into it. So therefore, they have to look at all these nitty-gritties and make sure that they make something out of that journey. But more importantly, if you look at the fact that these airlines come into this country, take away whatever it is that we have in the sort of the capital flight that we discussed earlier, you will see that the program that the current government has of establishing a national carrier, looking at an aircraft leasing company, an MRO, that's a maintenance and repair organization. These three things, if we have it in this country, we will make sure that we keep our money within our country, and it helps us instead of growing other economies. Mr. Balami here runs an MRO now, for instance, and we know that that would reduce the amount of money that airlines carry out of the country for repairs and major maintenance of their aircraft once it is done in this country. So the earlier we grow our own industry and make sure that we do things inside our country, the better for us. In as much as we depend on foreign carriers, the capital flight is there, we will not have the experts that we need for the industry, and in the long run, we are losers for it. So therefore, the best thing is looking inwards.
agree that, we should look inwards, but even though it doesn't quite answer my question in terms of how we're currently still being treated by foreign carriers, I'm sure a lot of Nigerians would definitely look forward to seeing a Nigerian Airways, which is ours, which, is a Nigerian carrier. If smaller countries have it, why can't we have it? However, they'll be very wary of the corruption that could besiege a particular sector, because it's not because we didn't have one before. We let it die. We let it collapse. It deteriorated to the point where it finally had to give way for these independent carriers. So the question a lot of Nigerians will be asking is, how are we sure that when we finally get this this new Nigeria Airways, or when we finally sign an agreement, which we have attempted to do over time? You remember what has happened with Virgin Nigeria and what have you. It's not for lack of wanting to try to bring it back on board, and it hasn't succeeded. But how are we so sure that when it eventually comes on board, it will not suffer the same problems that the old Nigeria Airways suffered, and then it's all a waste of money and a pointless venture, so to speak?
The fact is, even if we do a national carrier now, it's going to be more or less commercially run. Government would have little pittance in it, really. So therefore, the fact that the former Nigeria Airways was mismanaged is not bound to happen again, because this time around, it will be a business-oriented organization that government would have little control over. Going back to that question that you raised earlier on the issue of maltreatment of Nigerians on international airlines, we are up to the task. On a daily basis, we hold meetings with the international airlines. Passengers bring in their complaints to the tune of about 6,000 that we received this year alone, and which have been mostly resolved. So the more things happen, the more we encourage people. What you should do is, whenever you have issues in the airport, there is bound to be a consumer protection officer of the NCAA in that airport. There is a consumer protection desk. If the airline does not do what you think is right or what you know is right, you can always report to us, and we'll bring them in and make sure they do the right thing.
Right.
That's for sure.
Now, Mr. Balami, I'd like to bring you in. Now, we're saying we should patronize, Nigerian airlines, build the industry. But I remember the Director General of IATA saying that setting up an airline in Africa is risky. He talked about a lot of issues. He said high cost of operations, poor air connectivity in the continent, piling up taxes. He said monopolistic situations. He went on and on. I'd like to ask you, is this a situation now? Is that what you face in the airline industry?
Okay, well, that is true. The environment is quite hostile. However, there's so much potential, like you rightly mentioned. The truth of the matter is that Nigeria, or I would say Africa, is still virgin. We have a huge growing population, this demand coming up every day, with traffic increasing on a yearly basis. But one good thing also is that is why we keep going back to the issue of whether national carrier or flag carrier. It doesn't really matter. What is more important is, let's have a well-structured airline with capacity. And she, of course, expressed her fears about whether the national carrier now is going to be able to compete or is going to survive what Virgin Nigeria and the Nigerian Airways could not actually survive. And it's quite simple. Well, I was privileged to be among the National Carrier Committee members that was set up by the government in 2015, 2016. And I will tell you that we did a very, very fantastic job there, because for the first time, we looked at all the variables, which you just mentioned now. Because to have a sustainable national carrier that will survive the hostile environment, there are so many variables involved. For example, i.e., you look at a world-class maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility, because about $1 to $2, sometimes $3 million is being spent on aircraft C-check, D-check.
We had this conversation.
I know. True.
Well, just a moment. But what is? I'm a little concerned about an element of some of the things that, because I was going to ask you that before he brought it in,
okay,
the taxing of the airlines. But we'll take that on when we return from this break. Please stay with us. right, but just before we let our guests go, I'd like to ask Mr. Balami one of the things. Well, you heard Kayade's retinue of issues in the airline industry that's been raised by IATA, and I flagged one in my mind: taxation. Is the airline industry in Nigeria so heavily taxed that it makes it not as productive as it can be, not as profitable as it can be?
Well, I think that's just one variable. The truth of the matter is that when you look at the 5% charges that people actually complain about, which I believe goes to not just NCA, but also other NAMA, FAN, NIMET, ANCAT, the point is that that is just one. Anywhere in the world, that cost is there. The problem with Nigeria is we have so many compounded issues. First of all, we have issue of deploying the right machines for domestic operation, which we've not gotten right till date. Two, you have issue of foreign exchange. Like you agree that when Naira was 160 to $1, ticket was about 16,000 Naira. Today is 360 black market. Ticket is still, so that, because every spare part you buy, you know, that is there. Then you also go to issue of fuel, about 40%. I gave an example here the last time I was here, and I said, when Arik was flying to to Dubai, they were buying fuel for slightly above $1 per liter, while Emirates was buying fuel at 15 cents per liter. Now, how do they compete? So there are so many factors, so many challenges. And then you now come back to the issue of training. Till today, Aviation College is over 50 years. Thank God now, they finally bought Flight Simulator, right? And it's coming in this 2020. Now, things will begin to change. And that is why the Aviation Minister, being an expert, being an aircraft engineer, being a pilot, has seen that. And he saw the need for a national carrier. And the reason is that national carrier, in his own explanation, as an expert, will come with all those variables: the MRO, the world-class catering, the training institution for even the 737, the Airbus, and whatever, you know, and then it will also come with a subsidized and a more robust ground handling equipment for the airlines.
It will also face the same challenges you mentioned.
Like
fuel,
what?
Expensive fuel.
He's also looking at that. Like I told you when I was a member of the National Carrier Committee, which he played a key role at the back end. What happened? We found out that he sent us, we met even with the GMD then of NMPC. And they said, well, with what the minister is doing, they are working hard. He's working with NMPC right now to see that even our Warri and Kaduna refinery can even produce aviation fuel at about 17 naira or 15 naira per liter.
So why was it botched? I mean, it came out, a lot of people were excited, and a few months down the line, we didn't hear anything about it again. What happened during that period?
I think it's just the timing. Based on what he made us to understand is that he wants Nigerians to be involved in this national carrier. As at that time, I believe one of the reasons, there are so many reasons, but one of the reasons that I know of is that if he had gone on that time, the danger in it is that you have foreigners coming to take this piece, the entire piece. So he wants Nigerians to have the better part of it. And that is what is actually happening now. Yeah, he might not be saying much, but trust me, the aviation ministry is working seriously to give Nigeria a befitting national carrier.
Now, as far as anyone is concerned, you've spoken eloquently and intelligently about what the airline operator is facing. That's okay. But for the passenger,
we masses,
it's the experience we have.
Yeah.
So back to you, Director.
Go ahead.
How well do airlines follow consumer protection laws, and how effective are they in ensuring that the Nigerian or the flyer, the passenger, gets a better deal at any given time?
And if you could also add an advisory for this, festive period, the usual, traffic.
Okay. I would say, first and foremost, that whenever you come in with new innovations, there is bound to be some friction. People would not like to conform. But with time, if they realize your seriousness and the fact that this thing is now a regulation and it's something they must do, then they do it.
You're talking about the operators now.
I'm talking of the operators. Okay. You see, the civil aviation regulations cannot be made by us as a civil aviation regulating industry. The best we can do is come up with suggestions. Stakeholders now come together, airlines inclusive, and discuss these regulations before they become law. And they have to have a buy-in, they have to agree that this is civil aviation regulations, not just the Civil Aviation Authority regulations. So what happened when we came to do the regulations for consumer protection, which now forms the Part 19 of the Civil Aviation Regulations of the country, is we held 3 stakeholder fora with the airlines and agreed on what should be sanctionable offense, what should be the time frame within which an airline is asked to give passengers refreshments, time frame within which a traveler can go back to the airline and say, look, I don't want to travel again, give me back my money. And agreed on all these variables. With time, we reviewed these regulations. For example, in the first regulation of 2015, it was agreed that airlines would give refreshment after 1 hour of delay. The airlines came up with the fact that, look, if you give us only an hour within which to address the reason for the delay, as well as give refreshment to passengers, our attention is divided. So under the umbrella of IATA, they came and we agreed that, okay, 2 hours is a more agreeable time frame for them, which they agreed. And it now became the regulations. The issue of also how to get a refund of your money. You see, if a flight is delayed for upwards of 3 hours, you can go to the airline counter, look, I don't want to travel again. Okay. Give me back my money so I can go and buy another ticket from another airline and go.
Sorry, Director, because we are totally out of time. We have to. But all in all, you're saying that are they complying with the laws that you have this consumer?
They are complying with the law. And the fact is, if by any chance you try to get the airline to comply with anything and it doesn't, we are there. Okay. Come and report to us and we'll make sure that the airlines do the right thing. That's what we do day in, day out, every day.
And lastly, quick 30 seconds on this advisory that Kari asked you at the time.
Yes, this period also comes with issues of Jet A1, as Captain Adusunus pointed out, comes with the issues of weather. So when weather is in control, it means that the nature has it. So therefore, you have to exercise a lot of restraint in traveling during this period because safety is paramount. Whenever safety is involved, comfort takes the back seat. Thank you very much.
All right, I want to thank you very much for your time this morning, gentlemen. The Director, Consumer Protection of NCAA, Adamu Abdullahi, as well as David Balami, aviation expert and former president of NABE. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.